Brian Lehrer on WNYC. My next guest has been called the Elvis of philosophy and the most prominent living Marxist philosopher. Oh, and he endorsed Donald Trump for president. You may not have heard of him, but Slovenian philosopher and psychoanalyst Slavoj Žižek is a huge name on the European left. And he is with me now because he has a new book, Against the Double Blackmail, Refugees, Terror, and Other Troubles with the Neighbors, which focuses on the causes and perpetuation of the refugee crisis and what can be done to end it. Mr. Žižek, thank you for coming on. Welcome to WNYC.
Thanks very much. It's an honor for me to be here.
Thank you. Let's do the election part first. You're not American, so you don't vote here, but you said you would rather have Trump as president than Hillary Clinton because, quote, he will not introduce fascism. Do I have that right? Isn't he the one, not Clinton, who we worry about fascism with?
First, I think this is a typical wrong leftist reaction. You see something that you and me also obviously dislike, and instead of analyzing it closely, you say fascism, fascism. No, it's precisely not the old fascism. By this, I don't deny that Trump is an extremely dangerous figure. I despise him. I find him repelling, even at the level of manners. Look, what we are witnessing today is simply, and I'm maybe a kind of a Marxist conservative, but I find this horrible, a decline of simple decency, public manners. Things, and you as radio host guy should know this, things that 10, 20 years ago were considered unpronounceable in public. Now you can say them in public. Now some idiots, actor-style studio would have said, isn't it fine, we are more open? No, it's not fine. Appearances matter, all this matters. So, but my point is only this one. My big hope, not that I want any proletarian revolution, I'm a very pessimist Marxist, isn't it obvious that we are approaching a crisis of what Noam Chomsky called manufacturing consent? The whole system, thick network of unwritten rules how the political process works is breaking down. So rethinking, restructuring of the entire political field is needed. And my hope is that with Trump as president, maybe this will unleash a new political dynamic where a more authentic left, not a lunatic revolutionary Marxist left, but simply a more authentic left will arise.
Has an opportunity from the political chaos to come, it sounds like you're saying.
And from inertia. I don't despise personally, I don't know her, Hillary Clinton. I'm always suspicious, that's because I come from an ex-communist country. This type of false unity, listen, Hillary is the candidate from Wall Street to Occupy Wall Street, from Saudi Arabian money to LGBTQ+, and so on. When you have such a broad coalition, I always ask who is nonetheless not included. It's clear for me, just to give you, not to talk too much, the formula. A, Hillary lost because she got rid of Bernie Sanders. She failed in recapturing that anti-establishment protest vote, so she didn't lose because she went too far to the left, but precisely because she neglected that popular rage. So this is why, although I have critical moments of him, I sincerely admire Bernie Sanders. Many of those who were mobilized by him, aren't they precisely people who are usually supporting anti-establishment Republican Party movements, those who are now for Trump? I think without this mobilizing of this, some elite liberals call them white trash, mainstream, lower-class boys, the liberal left should stop dismissing them, despising them, and so on. We cannot achieve anything without getting them on our side.
Listeners, maybe you already know some of the work of Slavoj Žižek, or maybe you're hearing him now for the first time. If you'd like to call in and talk to him, 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. And we'll get to your book and the question of the refugees, which is central to your book. But I'm curious to follow up on one thing that you said. You mentioned that you're from former communist country, Slovenia, so you have a certain worldview as a Marxist. How do you come out of the former communist region and be a Marxist? Some of the most conservative calls that we get on this show are from New Yorkers who were emigres from the old Soviet Union, usually older folks who came from the old Soviet Union or the other countries in the Soviet orbit, who have no patience for social democracy and only want everything to be free market because they associate it with totalitarianism.
Listen, let me be very clear. My credentials are clear on that point. I was not a radical dissident, but dissident enough not to get a permanent job. I was unemployed for a couple of years. I was not allowed to work in university and so on and so on. And if anything, I'm extremely critical of 20th century communism. I think the game is over. A nice irony I have here. Once in a dialogue I professed it with Fukuyama. I told him, maybe you won. Like, end of communism, new neoliberal world order. But I told him, isn't it the ultimate irony that communists, where they are still in power, China, Vietnam, are today the best managers of the most brutal, wild capitalism? So that's over for me. And I'm not a naive. When I say Marxist, I mean something very modest. I mean, we are clearly approaching some type of a crisis. My God, Elon Musk a week ago spoke about this, how we will have to have citizens' income, government will... So, the model of liberal capitalism is approaching its limit. We are approaching new type of problems, how to regulate biogenetics, ecology, intellectual property, and so on. All I'm saying is it cannot go on. Capitalism, especially welfare state capitalism, had its great moments. Listen, let me ask you a frank question, and I'm saying this as a Marxist, my God. Was there ever in the entire, maybe, human history, a period where a larger percentage of people lived relatively good lives with freedom, safety, than in the golden era of European social democracy?
And your answer would be no?
Yes. No, sorry. Yes, it was the best time.
Yes.
No, it was never better.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that era is getting over. We are approaching a totally new constellation. And this is my first claim. Capitalism is approaching this type of a crisis. My second claim is that it's even a temptation of some leftists to see for a way out, referring to some Latino American leftists, some tribal primordial wisdom of the way to oppose global capitalism. No, we have to go through it. So we will be forced to do something. If we don't do it, Hollywood has an answer. Hunger Games, Elysium, it will be a new terrifying society.
Or China has an answer, because in your book you write about
but China
how
is approaching Hunger Game. China is becoming a Hunger Game country.
Yes.
20% the new middle class lives beneath a cupola.
Yes.
But my last point, I'm a pessimist
please.
Marxist. Did you see, or some of our esteemed viewers, I hope they saw the movie which was so popular by some of the leftists, V for Vendetta? At the end, the crowd breaks into the British Parliament, people take over. As I usually say, I'm sorry for this slight obscenity, I'm ready to sell my mother into slavery to see a movie called V for Vendetta Part 2. But what will they do next day when they take over? What new order will they establish? I'm afraid the left doesn't have a good answer to this.
So as it relates to the book, you state that refugees are the price humanity is paying for the global economy.
Yes, but again, I'm here an authentic Marxist. By this I mean, Marx was not simply against capitalism. He was very ambiguous. He was aware capitalism is the most revolutionizing force and so on and so on. But yes, this is true. If you look at all those critical points, Libya, Northern Africa, Iraq, Syria, and so on, you can see not that the people there are totally innocent. I'm not one of those crazy leftists who feel good if they punish themselves. Like, oh, we are responsible for all the evils in the world. No. If you took things like ISIS, Daesh, terrorism, and so on, this is not just a passive reaction. This is a way to react to a predicament with a positive vision. And we have to confront that. But at the same time, we are fully involved in the situation which exploded there.
You seem to warn people on the left against romanticizing the refugees, but at the same time, you say we need to totally embrace them.
I don't like the term embraced. It's too
Romantic?
sentimental.
Yeah.
It's not embrace. It's a problem we co-created. We have to deal with it.
So I'm summarizing. How do you say we have to own it? How would you put it?
We have to clearly confront the problem by way of fully admitting our part of guilt in it. Which means when refugees come to Europe, it's not simply a question of humanitarian question of are our hearts big enough and so on and so on. We should take care of them, but without any romantic mystification. For example, people on the left in Europe downplay cultural problems, which are there. They come with their way of life. For example, the way Islamic community treat their women, their family relations. This is not just a deviation. This is their way of life. And we are all deeply attached to our way of life. I don't have an easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not simply saying they have to accept our European way or we should respect their way of life. But that's one problem. The other problem...
Or some Muslims coming from some more old world type of cultures.
Yeah. Although I wouldn't minimize this problem. As we see in Europe, it's a serious problem. Not to mention the fact that the horror of, which is exploding now, of European right-wing populist opposition. You think now bad about yourself, you Americans. Let me, in spite of electing Trump, let me assure you, but in a sad way, we Europeans are worse now. Things you can read now in Europe in official press, like in my country now. The main right-wing story is George Soros, a Jew, is secretly organizing the Muslim invasion of Europe, so they even deny the Arab-Israeli conflict. The right-wing stories behind the Muslim invasion of Europe, there are Jews.
That's the right-wing lie right now.
Yeah, but it's no longer marginal. That's the horror.
Yes.
You can read about it. And also, let me give you another example of where I think we should openly address the problems. Nobody almost asks the question, okay, refugees, yes, but aren't there, just beneath the domain of war, Syria, Iraq, some extremely wealthy Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Emirates? How many refugees are they taking? No one. Why this focus on Europe? I'm saying, to shock my friends a little bit, I consider myself an enlightened leftist Eurocentrist. Because did you notice how even when anti-Eurocentrists criticize Europe, they do it on the base of European legacy. The very universal ethical norms that we obey today, equality, gender equality, welfare, human rights, they are part of European legacy.
Enlightenment values.
Yes, and I totally stick to them shamelessly. I don't think there is anything in a bad sense Eurocentric about them.
So do you have to resolve somehow that with the more old world values of a lot of the refugees coming from the Middle East in order to politically make it acceptable for France, which might elect Le Pen president like we just elected Trump, and for this country to take them?
I think that the first thing to admit, I hope you would agree, is that there is no simple, easy solution. Because up to a point, poor immigrants have the right to say, but also the values that you want to impose on us. And by values, I don't mean abstract principle. I mean behavior. Concrete rules, manners for everyday life are also colored by a specific culture and so on. But I think we have openly to set the limit somewhere. That's my point.
Elliot in Queens, you're on WNYC.
Hi, Brian. Good to talk to you, and it was very interesting to hear your guest's point of view. I just wanted to say that after the election, something's coming up in the media, on posts on social media, all over the place, that's really angering me and scaring me, which is that I see too many posts and articles that are making believe that Trump's victory is due centrally to misogyny or racism or anti-gay or anti-Muslim views. That makes no sense. Trump couldn't be elected by just the KKK and the Tea Party. The fact is, a lot of people who voted for Trump are people who had previously voted for Obama. He won the election fair and square. What elected him in a lot of ways is that, narrow elites in the media or in business or in academia or all over who've easily flourished in this neoliberal economy over the past 36 years have really ignored the lives of the majority of the people who live in this country.
And are you hearing an echo of this thinking of your thinking in Mr. Žižek?
Well, in the sense that he's taking a broader view, not being someone who's completely immersed in the American conversation and the American mentality and the American media, and seeing not just what's going on here, but the way in which internationally these systems of two economies that exist here, that exist in China, are affecting people's lives and shoving certain people, working class, middle class, poor people, into a declining world, whereas a very small group is getting comfortable or rich or fabulously rich or godlike rich. It seems like his view is one that Americans have to hear, even if they don't agree with everything he has to say, because it gives a perspective that is just hardly reflected in anything in media here.
I understand. And so I think Elliot is hearing you accurately, because a whole chapter of your book, which we're not going to have time to go down the list, but you've been enumerating some of them, is a list of taboos on the left that the left needs to get past in order to be as constructive as it can be in the current situation.
I'm really sad we don't have more time, because I totally agree with my kind interlocutor. I am a leftist, and as a leftist I agree with him. This cultural left, whose big obsessions are apartheid in toilets and so on, which are all issues where I totally support them. But the greatest tragedy of United States liberalism is this split between cultural left and so-called, I'm saying this without any dismissive, arrogant attitude, worries, anxieties of ordinary people. If the left doesn't resolve this gap, then the left, much of the academic cultural left, will really remain class-oriented, but in the opposite sense. Can't you see in this dismissal of many of Trump voters like white trash and so on? Sorry to tell you, but it's a clear class dimension here.
Too much identity politics?
Yes, but I'm not against identity politics, but I am against that terrible combination, political, where identity politics is here to neutralize economic struggle for justice, and so on and so on. Because we are in a political struggle, left, right, and so on, and it's not just a struggle of recognition, identity, where if we just recognize fully each other's identities, everything will be okay.
Emma in Rahway, you're on WNYC. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for taking my call. Your guest.
Thank you. And forgive me, but we have about a minute left in this segment, so go right for it.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say I'm really glad you had your guest on today. I have to say I've been waiting for NPR to have a voice like this for a while. I've been a Bernie supporter since day one, and I think the bottom line is America wanted a populist this year, and it's ironic that the Republican Party gave it to them, and the Democratic kind of didn't live up to that expectation the American people clearly had.
Thank you very much. 30 seconds for a last thought.
I totally agree with it. I'm against populism, what it means on the right wing. But populism also stands for genuine explosion of rage by so-called ordinary people, their anxieties, and so on and so on. And it's strange how the academic leftist elite is afraid of this, suspecting in it some kind of a proto-fascist, redneck, white trash plot or whatever. It's a terrible predicament, and that's why I'm afraid of Hillary. Hillary, for me, how did he take hegemony of Democratic Party? By getting rid of Bernie Sanders, who precisely stood for an orientation which would take into account this rage.
Slavoj Žižek's new book is Against the Double Blackmail, Refugees, Terror, and other troubles with the neighbors. And if you'd like to hear more about it and more from him, he'll be giving a talk with the writer Hari Kunzru at the Brooklyn Public Library next Monday, November 14th at 8 o'clock, Monday at 8 at the Brooklyn Public Library for Slavoj Žižek. You're from Slovenia. You didn't know Melania Trump over there, did you?
No. Melania Trump was still her marriage to Donald, extremely unknown in Slovenia. The only thing we know, and it's supreme irony, as it is clear now, her origins are a quite well-standing ex-communist nomenclatura family. It's a nice irony, I mean. But let me just finish, if I may, by telling how I love this city. I love New York because New York is for me not one big apple, but a combination of like dozens, especially in Manhattan, dozens of small villages. Like I live here around Washington Square, and when I'm here for a month, I never use a cab, I never take a subway, everything is here. New York is not for me city where it's too bustling, I get nervous. It's city where I find peace. I love New York.
I agree. Alexis Grinnell and Michelle Goldberg coming up next. Slavoj Žižek, thank you very much. A pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC.